And now it's time for us to revisit raga and learn a little bit more about that concept. And here you see kind of a stepping stairs of syllables. You might remember the cute little Indian girl in the last presentation at the end, going through these different scale degrees. So there are alternate spellings for this word raga. Sometimes this rag spelled several different ways. Double A for raga sometimes. And once again, I described it as scales plus. It's both a set of pitches like Western scales and a hierarchy of pitches which some more highly emphasize than in the West. And the other distinction is that raga can be different, ascending and descending. The only thing we have in the West that's remotely similar to that is something we call a melodic minor scale, which some of you students might be familiar with, where there's a certain set of notes in the upper part in the ascending, sol, la, ti, do, and then the descending part turns into do, te, le, sol. And so you have those kinds of things happening in the raga system. Now, South Indian pieces, art music, and classically influenced folk music, they tend to be complementary sets of smaller pieces, kind of like movements in Western music. So again, Beethoven writes a piano sonata. It's got a movement 1, 2, 3, and 4. You might expect certain movements to have a certain kind of character in terms of its tempo, its energy, its complexity. And it might follow like fast movement, slow movement, 3/4 movement, and fast movement for a Beethoven sonata, for example. And these pieces will tend to be slower, slightly faster, and kind of accelerating like that. Let's take a look at a couple examples of what we're talking about here. These videos are not talking about the multi-movement idea. We're still looking at the raga, the idea of scales plus. The first example, we have a vocalist who will accompany himself on the harmonium, the small wind-driven keyboard. And he will demonstrate a scale that's very similar to what we call in the West a pentatonic scale. Do, re, mi, sol, la. And you're going to hear those different pitches, but of course he's going to ornament them in the Indian way. He's going to explain how he uses that scale to create melodies. The second example is are some Indian sisters who are musicians who obviously present to Westerners, to English speakers, some of the things about their Indian tradition. And so we're going to watch that from 3 minutes and 40 of the timing up to 6 minutes and 45 seconds. So roughly 3 minutes. And you'll see some projections of the different concepts as they explain them. And that gives you a little bit more of a taste of how the raga is approached in melodic ornamentation.
I'm using only 5 notes. Sa re ga pa dha sa, sa dha ba ga re sa. If the composition is Gaiye Ganapati Jagabandhana, Gaiye Ganapati Jagabandhana, Sankara Suvana Bhavani ke Nambana, Gaiye Ganapati Jagabandhana. Right? Another example of raga. Here now we will take rag. This is the morning rag. In morning rag, you know that when you just wake up in the morning, everything is fresh, you are cool, you are sitting. Alright? So the notes itself you will see that sa re. It is not that sa re, yeah, it's not flat, it's already, you know. Ga ma pa ni sa sa ni ga pa ma ga re sa sa re ga ji sa re morning raga.
It's very different.
Yeah, it's totally different. That's good.
It's
You
more
got a very
sad.
good ear.
I find,
You can discover the up and down of the notes.
yeah, I find it more sad. It's
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
down.
As I said that in the morning, you feel...
That's the beginning.
Yeah.
That's the beginning. That's the beginning. And here, if you will see that there's a song like Jago Mohan Pyare Jago Mohan Pyare Savari Surat More Mana Bhave Sundar Lal Hamare Jago Mohan Pyare Jago Mohan. Right?
Swa means self and Ra means illumination in Sanskrit. So in India we very sincerely believe that music is the path to spiritual enlightenment. So Swarams form the ladder to this enlightenment, if you will. The 7 Swarams are Sa, Ri, Ga, Ma, Pa, Da, Ni. They come from Shadjam, Rishabham, Gandharam, Madhyamam, Panchamam, Dhaivatam and Nishadam. So as I mentioned in my previous slide, G is the pitch that we have here. So if we take the Ragam Shankaravarnam and we take the reference pitch as G and that would be our Sa note, then the scale of Shankaravarnam would sound something like this. Shailaja, please show us that. So, if you know, this could either be Sarigama Padanisa or it could also be Do Re Mi Fa Sol La Ti from the solfa system. Now that we've understood the basic elements of Karnatic music, we move to the topic of the day, the Ragam. Ragam is a set of rules to build a melody. The rules typically are Arohanam and Avarohanam. Arohanam is a set of rules for ascending and Avarohanam is a set of rules for descending. So just going up and down the scale would not give you a ragam. Permutations and combinations, following these rules, adding gamakas. Gamakas, there are 10 different types of gamakas. These are actually frequency variations that are done to each note. By including all these elements, you would create a ragam. So if someone was singing a ragam, how would you identify it? So there are recognizable qualities for a ragam. The first one is a Jivaswaram. Jivaswaram, as the name suggests, is a life note. This swaram, it breathes life into the ragam. So an example for this would be Gandharam in Shankarabharanam. That Gandharam is a Jivaswaram for Gandharam, for Shankarabharanam. And the reason for that is it brings a soothing effect when it's sung in the middle octave, but the same swaram brings an electrifying effect when sung in the higher octaves. Another way to identify a ragam is a footprint. A footprint is either one note or a combination of notes that takes you, say, 80% down the road to identify a ragam. A good example for this would be this is a footprint for Kamboji. The minute someone sings this, you can almost be sure that the raga that they are going to sing is Kamboji.
Next, we want to consider what I refer to as the usual roadmap of South Indian music, the normal pattern of how this traditional music gets put together. And first, we tend to have a free rhythm intro called the alap, which sets the mood and establishes the raga, that particular melodic materials that are going to be used in that composition, that performance. Take a look at the first 3 minutes of this video that will give you the idea of setting the mood, exploring the creative possibilities of the scale, sometimes even tuning up the instruments. You're going to see a Rudra Veena player establishing that mood with the alap. Next, we're going to see the second typical section of South Indian traditional music, the jor, which establishes the metric pulse, or the tala, rhythmic pattern. And we're going to watch from about 1 minute to 4 minutes, about 3 minutes total of this particular excerpt, to see how the mridangam drum is in at that point, establishing the rhythm pattern. And we also get to see a flute player and violinist playing with the possibilities of that scale and getting a little bit more intense as they proceed. Typically, the concluding section of a typical 3-section scheme in traditional music in India is the jala, the faster concluding section, or the big finish, if you want to think of it that way. It's the most emphatic, most impressive display of psychomotor ability, virtuosity, musical expressiveness. So we have a video here we can watch from 6 minutes to the end. It's about 2 minutes of the end of a piece, a vocalist with a violinist, and you're not only going to get to hear the most intense, the loudest, the kind of busiest part of the composition, but you're also going to hear some heterophonic interplay between the voice and the violin.
Thank you.